Kevin returned to Chicago with a mission to locate the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm before the current one dies. Unfortunately, Kevin still has to deal with a number of domestic issues before he can begin his search. Lily gave in to pressure from the city and moved into the mayor's mansion. Kevin joined her, but then so did their families and friends, including Lily's mother Dorothy, her pregnancy pal Nancy, and their pets Missy the cat and Hank the dog. Kevin took Hank to a nearby urban dog park, only to be set upon by 50 Mavericks, all of whom were at least level 5s. When Kevin reached for his own levels to defend the dog park's innocent bystanders, Kevin realized that he could no longer access any of his levels. For a moment, Kevin could only stare in shock as his enemies pulled on masks and bore down on him. Had Kevin's levels not returned to him when he had come back from the Upper Realm? Kevin had lost his levels when he entered the Upper Realm, but he had expected that. Even though Kevin had not been able to refine his levels as he planned during his stay there, Kevin's levels should have been returned to him when he came back to the ordinary world. But now Kevin couldn't sense his own levels at all. Were they gone for good? Were they... Kevin's thoughts were interrupted as the first of the Mavericks ran at him, yelling challenges. Kevin Williams was a legend in these circles. His reputation was already that of one of the greats. Although their employer had assured these Mavericks that Kevin would be at his weakest, they still required petty tricks to psych themselves up to fight Kevin. Kevin dodged away from the attackers, relying on his ordinary martial artistry and superior reflexes. He reached out to his loyal pet, Hank the dog, with his mind. He ordered Hank to start herding the innocent dog owners and their pets to the far corner of the enclosed area. The last thing Kevin wanted was a civilian, human, or canine getting caught in the crossfire. Fortunately, Hank had a sheepdog somewhere in his ancestry and was happy to obey. Kevin made a quick survey of the area. If he couldn't fight without his levels, he would have to improvise his defense from what was already there. Kevin dashed to the nearest water fountain. He turned it on full blast and aimed the spout of water directly into the eyes and faces of the two Mavericks closest to him. The force of water made the Mavericks cough and sputter. Kevin picked up a complimentary water dish and flung it at the two men like a frisbee. The hard metal edge connected with the bridge of one's nose before bouncing off to conk the other one upside the head. The two Mavericks fell to the ground. But more Mavericks were coming for him. Kevin ran in a zigzag path, avoiding the knives and ninja stars that they threw after him. A large metal basket of well-chewed tennis balls had been thoroughly provided for the dogs. Kevin scooped it up and flung the contents at his attackers' feet. The Mavericks all trod on the tennis balls, which rolled under their feet and sent them sprawling to the ground. Kevin made short work of them while they were down, delivering sharp blows with the basket to each of their heads in turn. Kevin heard a flurry of barks from the dogs as the next set of Mavericks closed in upon him. Kevin understood that the dogs, especially Hank, were desperate to lend their support to Kevin in his time of need. Kevin gratefully accepted the help of some of the largest and fiercest breeds. While Kevin kept the attention of the Mavericks on himself, he directed the dogs to attack his foes from the rear. Hank, along with two pit bulls, a Doberman, and a St. Bernard the size of a small pony, who freed themselves from their owner's grasps, threw themselves at the Mavericks. The surprise attack was a complete success. Hank and the Doberman intimidated the Mavericks with their razor-sharp teeth. The pit bulls each clamped onto a Maverick's leg and held on tightly, their powerful jaws shredding muscle and bone. The St. Bernard pounced on one Maverick after another, knocking them to the ground. The Mavericks were left stunned from the force of the blow, as well as the gallon of slobber the big dog unleashed on each of them. Only a few Mavericks remained. Kevin could sense that these were the weakest of the bunch. They had obviously held back out of a sense of cowardice, hoping their more powerful friends would take out the great Kevin Williams. These Mavericks charged Kevin. Kevin's ordinary but highly refined martial arts skills were enough to deal with these jokers. Kevin grabbed the lead Maverick by an arm and a leg and spun him in a circle. The Maverick bashed into his fellows, knocking them to the ground stunned. Kevin finished by dumping the Maverick still in his grasp into the nearest trash can with a squish. The trash can was thoughtfully labeled, "Thank you for cleaning up after your dog." There was only one enemy left standing. Kevin reached out with his senses, expecting to get a sense of this last fighter's abilities and levels. Instead, what he got was a confused jumble of impressions. There was power here for sure, but it had been twisted and corrupted beyond anything Kevin had sensed before. "You're no ordinary maverick fighter," Kevin proclaimed. The maverick tore off his mask, revealing himself to be none other than Vincent Reeves. "I guess the upper realm wasn't the experience that you thought it would be." Vincent sneered at Kevin. "And I guess that the lower realm wasn't the experience you thought it would be either," Kevin shot back. A long time ago, Kevin had cut off one of Vincent's hands after Vincent had accosted him and tried to wrest Kevin's night dagger from him in a vengeful act. More recently, Kevin had encountered Vincent in the lower realm. There, Kevin had sliced off Vincent's other hand. Vincent now wore a prosthesis at the end of each arm. One was a razor-sharp hook, the other was a lead ball studded with wickedly sharp spikes. "Still more than a match for you," Vincent declared. He swiped at Kevin with first the hook and then the ball. "Especially now that your levels are still scrambled from your trip back through the portal from the upper realm. Not a comfortable experience, was it?" The trip back had indeed been hellish for Kevin, a seemingly endless vision of his failures and enemies, both real and imagined. But Vincent's words also gave Kevin hope. Apparently his levels weren't really gone. Kevin just had to locate the power within himself and get it sorted out. Only Kevin's superior reflexes allowed him to duck out of the way of first the one and then the other of Vincent's blows. Vincent kept coming, driving Kevin back until he was up against the chain-link fence separating the dog park from the pond. "I've got you now," Vincent crowed. He swung with both weapons at once. Since Kevin had nowhere left to maneuver, Vincent was confident he could finally take out Kevin Williams. But even as Kevin was ducking and dodging, he continued to search within himself. He was sure his powers were still there, and not only because of Vincent's words. Kevin was sure he would have known long before now if his levels had been gone entirely. At last, buried deep within a corner of himself that Kevin hadn't even entirely been aware of, Kevin found his levels. He reached for them and found them in a jumbled mass, but didn't have time to sort them out in a sleek stream of power. Instead, Kevin unleashed his powers directly at Vincent in a tangled mass. It was easily his worst directed use of power ever, unfocused and inefficient. But it also did the trick. Vincent was blown back 20 feet to land on his butt on top of a pile of dog poo. To add insult to injury, a tiny chihuahua, annoyed that it hadn't been able to join the fight earlier, ran up to Vincent and began to pee on him. "I'm not as helpless as you think," Kevin told Vincent. "This is why you will never truly be master of any power, Vincent. You lack the patience and humility to make sure your plan will work before implementing it." "Haven't you done enough to me already, Kevin?" Vincent pleaded from his soggy place on the ground. "You already took both my hands. What more can you take from me?" "You've made this impossible for me," Kevin said as he shook his head sadly. "Time and again, you've proven that you're unwilling to give up your petty plans of vengeance. I cannot allow you to continue like this." Vincent saw the cold determination in Kevin's eyes and knew his own death was near. Vincent snatched up the little chihuahua who had just finished emptying his doggy bladder all over him. "Hey, Kevin," Vincent yelled. "Fetch!" Vincent lodged the little chihuahua into the air directly towards the pond beyond the fence. The chihuahua let out a howl of terror. "My fur baby!" the dog's owner cried in horror. If Kevin took the time to finally eliminate Vincent as a threat forever, the innocent Canine would drown in the pond, if the force of the impact didn't kill it outright. But saving the dainty dog would mean Vincent would have the chance to go free. Kevin didn't waste a moment debating with himself. He launched himself over the fence. Several people had been out on the pond with stand-up paddle boards and had come ashore to see what the commotion in the dog park was. Kevin grabbed one of the boards and harnessed all of the force of his power to toss it out onto the lake. He followed up by launching himself onto the board, landing lightly as it still skimmed across the surface of the water. Kevin had timed it perfectly. The board came to a stop just as the aerial chihuahua was losing altitude. Kevin caught the dog gently in his arms, and the chihuahua let off a small arf of surprise. Cheers went up from all of the bystanders. Kevin paddled himself and the chihuahua back to the shore with his hands. The chihuahua stood on the front tip of the board like a doggy masthead. The crowd greeted Kevin at the shoreline. The chihuahua's owner covered Kevin and her pet with grateful kisses. Kevin was not at all surprised to see that in the commotion, Vincent Reeves had disappeared.